So there are loads of team ups and Marvel rivals at the moment. Some of them are really strong, some of them are not that good. But what we do know is that in season 2, we're going to be getting a rework to some of these team ups. So here are some of the best ones and the ones that need a rework. The first team up we have on this list is Allied Agents. Now this is the one that gives Black Widow the ability to use Hawkeye's ultimate for a short period of time. And I think this is pretty strong. Essentially, you're giving a whole total ultimate to another character in this game, and Hawkeye's ultimate's pretty strong, and pairing that with Black Widow's essentially hit scan sniper rifle, I think is actually a pretty decent overall team up, and I don't think this should be changed in any way, shape or form, because I actually think it's pretty decent. Now, if I have to place this one, I'm actually going to place it in B tier, and the reason for that is even though it's very strong and I do think it's super useful, I think just because of the fact that you're not going to find a Black Widow and a Hawkeye on the same team very often, you're not going to really come across it at all. And not only that, both of those heroes together in the same team doesn't really make up for good team synergy anyway. So maybe if they added in a third hero to make this work, that might make it slightly better and more viable. But right now I think it's B tier just because of that reason. But the actual ability itself is pretty powerful. Now the next one is Ammo Overload, which is absolutely insane. Now this basically allows Rocket Raccoon to grant the Punisher and Winter Soldier unlimited ammo for a short duration of time whilst the beacon is active. I think this is an absolutely insane team up that is in this game at the moment, and because the Winter Soldier and Punisher are so popular, as well as Rocket being really popular, I think this is super strong in this game, especially at taking out high HP heroes or just being able to put down some insane firepower. Not to mention that both Winter Soldier and Punisher have some of the best ultimates in the game, so basically just allowing them to build up insane ult charge. So now placing this one, we're going to be placing this one, of course, in S tier. You're going to come across it quite a lot because, like I said, all three of these characters are super popular, and not to mention that they're incredibly strong as well when they have unlimited ammo. So again, you're going to come across this a lot if you haven't already, but I think this is an extremely good team up. I don't think it's actually broken, having said that though, so I don't think it really needs a nerf or anything within season 2, but I do think it's an extremely solid team up and they should just keep it as it is. The next team up we have is Atlas Bond. Now this gives Luna's Snow Frozen Chi, allowing her to push back enemies, deal damage, and also heal close by teammates as well. Now you need to have Iron Fist for this team up, and that is why I think you're not going to come across it all too often, because Iron Fist is not super popular in the kind of higher ranks. In terms of placing this team up, I'm actually going to say this one needs a rework. And the reason for that is the team up doesn't really make sense anyway between Luna Snow and Iron Fist, and not to mention the team up itself is not quite as powerful as some of the other ones we have in this game at the moment. There's some that are incredibly strong, and this one just does not sit in that category. So I do either think it needs a rework or they can just change it completely to something else. The next team up we have is Chilling Charisma. Now this one is Luna Snow's that grants Namor and Jeff the Shark frozen abilities, and when it comes to Namor's one, we all know this is super strong right now because Namor is one of the meta heroes in the game, and it gives him his kind of ice squid, which deals a bit more damage and also grants slowing effects to the enemy. And it's similar for Jeff as well. His primary attack then starts slowing enemies within a certain radius as well, which this is a super strong team up in my opinion, especially for Namor, and especially since Namor and Luna Snow are both meta heroes. So I think this one you're going to come across quite a lot, and every Namor character is always trying to request a Luna team up. In terms of placing this one, right now this is absolutely S tier, of course. Now obviously to make any future adjustments to any of the other team ups, then this could potentially drop down, but as it stands, because Luna Snow as well as Namor are both meta heroes, and this gives Namor an extra squid, I think it is kind of broken and could do with a nerf, but like I said, it depends on how they buff the other team ups in the game. But this one should stay. I think it's actually a pretty strong one, especially for Jeff as well, to make him a bit more viable. The next team up is Dimensional Shortcut, which allows Black Panther and Psylocke to use the portals of magic to reverse their position a couple of seconds before. I don't think this works extremely well in this game at all. I think this was not kind of done very well. I kind of get the idea of this one, but I don't think I've ever seen this team up used at all in this game whatsoever out of all the games I've played. I kind of get the direction they were going with this team up, but I do think it needs a rework, if I'm being perfectly honest. They can either change it completely, because I don't think anyone ever uses this anyway. But like I said, I get the idea of what they were trying to do, because they're dive heavy characters and they could potentially benefit from kind of escaping a fight. But I don't think this is the correct way to do this team up, and this is one of the ones that either need a rework or a change, in my personal opinion. Now, the next team up we have is the webbed acorn with the Spider-Man and Squirrel Girl team up. Now, I actually think this team up is really good. This is one of the more underrated ones in my opinion. Coming from someone who plays Squirrel Girl a lot, I actually think this pairs with her kit perfectly. It gives her another way to stun enemies, and as you can see, it stuns multiple enemies at once if they're in close proximity to each other, and I think it's absolutely insane. I actually think this is a really, really good team up. I don't think it's broken in any way, but I just think it's great when you know how to use it correctly, and especially for trapping certain enemy ultimates and things like that as well. It's a great stun tool along with her standard stun. So this is one of the ones that I think are very underutilized and underappreciated within this game. If I had to place this one, I'm actually going to place it in A tier. I don't think it's broken in any way, shape or form, and the fact that Squirrel Girl does get used a lot more now, and Spider-Man is also becoming more and more of a meta character, you can definitely see both of these characters in the same team, making this team up a bit more viable than before when Spider-Man wasn't so popular. But like I said, I actually think this is a pretty strong team up. It doesn't need a rework. I think it's actually really good just the way it is. Next up, we've got Wolverine's Fastball, which you can do with the Hulk or the Thing, and if we get Colossus in this game, I'm going to assume he can do this too. But this is actually really good. I don't think this is broken in any way, shape or form. It essentially gives Wolverine his Feral Leap twice. So if you do have a good Wolverine player on your team and you've got a duo team up, then this actually works extremely well in my opinion, especially for making Wolverine slightly more powerful than he already is, because he can essentially Feral Leap more than once. And I think that just makes him extremely, extremely powerful. Now, in terms of placing this one, it's a bit of a weird one and I'll explain why. I do want to put it in A tier. I do think is extremely powerful. Now, you need to have a friend that you trust to use this with, because I've seen a lot of clips online where people are just throwing their Wolverines off the edge of a cliff, and that is not what you want. But like I said, if it's used correctly, this can make your Wolverine extremely powerful, and you need to make use of this because, like I said, having 2 Feral Leaps basically makes him unstoppable in this game. So like I said, as long as you've got either a friend or someone you trust playing the Thing or Hulk, then it works out extremely well. The next team up we have is the Gamma Charge, and this one actually got nerfed. Was a super powerful team up, but now it's not so powerful anymore, especially due to the Iron Man portion of this, because Iron Man did receive the strongest buff from this team up. However, Doctor Strange didn't really receive any nerfs with this, but regardless, no one really used it on Doctor Strange all that often anyway. If you received it, it was a definite bonus, but that's all it was for Doctor Strange. But for Iron Man, it essentially made him incredibly strong. Now, when it comes to placing this one now, as much as it used to be absolutely S tier, I just think it needs a rework personally, because the buff that Iron Man gets is not significant enough. It's only like 10 extra damage or something like that, which is not worth it at all when Doctor Strange is pretty powerful by himself anyway, so you don't even really need this team up with either one of those 2 heroes now. So this one either needs to be changed, reworked, or something else entirely, because this is not useful in this game whatsoever anymore. And it's a bit of a shame because I think it was pretty strong before, and if you did like all those heroes and there are pretty popular characters, then obviously there's no point in using it anymore. Next up, we have my favorite team up in this game at the moment, which is the Guardians Revival with Star-Lord, Mantis, and Adam Warlock. Now, this team up is basically making Adam Warlock basically way more powerful than he actually would be without this. Essentially, Star-Lord and Mantis get a free revive each if there's an Adam Warlock on the team. Not to mention, Adam Warlock also has his own revive, and we already broke down this full team up in a separate video on how to actually use it to get the most out of it, so we'll link that at the end of this video. But like I said, man, this is actually incredible in terms of a team up, and it's super strong right now, and a lot of people are picking these heroes in general to make sure they're making the most of this team up, especially since it essentially negates staggering. But like I said, the full details for that will be left at the end of this video if you want to check that out. So in terms of where to place this one, this is absolutely S tier at the moment, and it could actually be broken. And I'll explain the full details, like I said, in the video at the end of this one, because we go over many different ways on how to break this even further. And I do think it's pretty good. It could probably get a nerf, but it depends on how much they buff some of the other team ups in season 2, whether or not it does deserve a nerf or not. So we need to kind of wait and see. I don't think they should nerf it just yet, because I actually think it is pretty strong, but again, it could be broken if they don't change the team ups. The next team up is the Lunar 4s with Cloak and Dagger and Moon Knight, essentially giving Moon Knight the ability to go invisible within a certain radius, and they also buffed this with the recent update, allowing him to be healed slightly within this radius as well. Now, this one, in my opinion, I don't really see getting used all that often, and even when it does get used, I don't think it has tremendous value to Moon Knight whatsoever. And we'll get... In terms of where to place this team up, I actually think it needs to go in the rework section. The reason for this is because even with the buff, it's just really not that viable. The radius is too small, so maybe if they increase the radius for it, it makes a bit more sense, because most people know Moon Knight standing inside that radius anyway, and making him invisible for like a small tiny radius, people know where he's going to be. Most attacks have a large radius in this game, especially melee ones, so this doesn't really help him whatsoever in my opinion, and plus you can still hit him inside it. It's not like he's invincible, he's just invisible. So like I said, I just don't think this is going to help him whatsoever. So this needs a rework, or they can just change the team up entirely. The next team up is the Metallic team up with Scarlet Witch and Magneto, which basically gives Magneto a sword that he can throw for a short period of time. Now this sword has insane amounts of damage, and I actually think this is a really good team up. I don't think it's broken in any way, shape or form, because it gives Magneto just that extra bit of punch that he needs to deal a bit more damage, especially when you're holding that front line. I think this is a really good team up, and this one was thought out very, very well in my opinion. So this one is pretty solid. In terms of where to place this team up, I'm going to put it in A tier, and the reason for that is because Scarlet Witch is incredibly popular right now, and coming from someone who mains Magneto, I've pretty much never not had this team up, because most people are willing to play Scarlet Witch at the moment. So for me personally, I think this is a great team up. I don't think it's broken in any way, and I just think that you're always going to have it, so that puts it higher up in the list. And also that team composition of Scarlet Witch plus Magneto is not a bad one either. So in general, I think this is just a really good team up. They should definitely keep this one in the game. The Planet X Pals team up is the next one, which allows Rocket and Jeff to be on the shoulders of Groot, and it gives them a 30% damage reduction. So this is only the damage reduction to Rocket and Jeff, by the way. You don't get it to Groot, but you can be healed up, of course, by Rocket or Jeff. Now, I think this is a pretty okay team up. I don't think it's going to be game changing in any way, shape or form. In terms of where to place this one, I'm going to put it in B tier. I don't think it's terrible. I think the damage reduction is okay for Rocket and Jeff. I think you'll find a lot more Rockets and a lot more Groots in most games anyway now, because they're very popular heroes, so you will get the team up itself. But how impactful it is inside this game is not quite as some of the other ones on this list. So like I said, it's going to be in B tier at the moment. It could do with a rework, to be honest, but I don't think it's quite as bad as the ones that do definitely need a rework. The next team up is the Ragnarok Rebirth, and I think this one's actually incredibly strong and underused, because Hela's pretty strong in this game at the moment, Loki's pretty powerful, and Thor's pretty decent as well. So all these characters are not terrible heroes by any means, and even combining them all together in the same team is actually a pretty decent composition as well. So essentially, Hela, if she lands a final hit on an enemy, she can respawn Loki or Thor back to their original positions. And this is if they're in the respawn phase of the game. If they're still alive, then they get bonus health. So all of this is pretty decent in my opinion. I think it's a really strong team up. In terms of where to place this one, I'm actually going to put it in S tier. I actually think it's pretty good. I think it's the good balance of having to do something to get a reward back, and obviously landing a final hit with Hela is not that difficult if you know what you're doing with her. And being able to bring back your teammates back to life, especially someone like Loki, for example, who's an extremely important part to a team composition, I think that's actually incredibly strong, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. So it is very underrated, but I do think it's S tier. The next team up is the Storming Ignition, which is the team up between Storm and the Human Torch. Now this is the first of its kind by combining two ultimates together as a team up in this game. So this is the first that we've seen this, and like I said, it is incredibly powerful at dealing tons of damage in a certain radius. Now one thing I do want to mention is that there's not very often you're going to have a 2 flyer setup, so that's the first thing, and especially in a team comp to have 2 flyers in it. And also the Human Torch right now is not really that strong as a hero in my personal opinion, so like I said, I don't think this one you'll see all that often. Now in terms of where to place this one, I'm actually going to put it in B tier, and the reason for that is because the composition also needs to make sense as well for these team ups to work. Now even though it's crazily impactful on a game, to have 2 flyers in your team composition doesn't really make sense, first of all, especially when both of them are DPS characters, but also on the fact that basically the Human Torch is not really that strong right now and no one really wants to pick him all that often. You're not really going to see this team up constantly, and maybe people pick the Human Torch for a couple of seconds within a game just to get this team up. That might work, but it just doesn't really make any sense to use this at the moment, especially like I said with Human Torch not being very good and also having to have 2 flyers in your team to make this work in the first place. The next team up we have is the Venom, Spider-Man and Penny Parker team up, which basically gives Penny Parker and Spider-Man the ability to have some symbiote spikes and deal damage and kind of push the enemies back as well. So I actually think this is an incredibly strong team up, especially with Spider-Man becoming more and more popular in the game at the moment, and also Venom being incredibly strong, and then Penny Parker is also pretty decent as well. So in terms of where to place this one, I actually think this is A tier. I don't think it's absolutely broken by any means because none of these heroes are crazy broken either. They just do make a really good composition. Even putting Venom, Penny Parker and Spider-Man all in the same team, you've got a good mix of different play styles there, and obviously Venom diving with Spider-Man makes this incredibly strong. So if you do have a good dive composition and pairing with Spider-Man and Venom, then you can definitely use this one and do well with it because it gives Spider-Man an extra attack to combo in and make him just a bit more versatile and a bit easier to use as well, actually, to get a couple more extra kills. So I do think this is a really good team up and it doesn't need changed at all. The next team up is the Voltaic Fusion, I think it's called, and that is team up with Thor, Captain America and Storm. And I actually think this team up is pretty decent. Essentially, it gives Storm an extra lightning attack. It also gives Captain America a bit more damage and the ability to throw his shields between targets with his primary attack. So I actually think this one's pretty decent, very underutilized and not really seen in games all too often, even though this team composition that we have here is actually a pretty decent one too. So where do we place this one? Now, I do think this one is actually A tier, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I think it's a really good team up. Now, it could be changed to add in more heroes potentially, but I think this is actually a really good composition and a really good team up, and it's just very underutilized, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, because having all 3 of these heroes in the same team could actually be incredibly strong, and then getting that team up just helps out an extra bit to make them a bit more powerful together. So I actually think this is really good, very underutilized, but it is A tier. The last and final team up we have here is for the Fantastic Four. So this essentially requires the Invisible Woman and then one or any of the other Fantastic Four heroes. And essentially they get overshield for any of the health that they've lost when the team up is active. So essentially they get overshield for a couple of seconds when the team up is active with the Invisible Woman. So it's a pretty decent one. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's going to keep you alive throughout games, but just for impact shields and if you need it in a pinch, it could be relatively decent. And the fact that there's more than 1 or 2 heroes that can benefit from this makes it pretty strong if maybe you have the full Fantastic Four in a complete team composition. In terms of where to place this one, I actually think it deserves to be in B tier. I don't think it's extremely broken in any way, shape or form, and it's not better than any of the ones above it, in my personal opinion. It's not game-changing team-ups, but it will keep you alive if you need it in a pinch, just to gain that overshield for a couple of seconds. So I think it's definitely one of the higher ones in B tier, but like I said, it just depends on when you use it. So there we have it. Those are all the team ups inside Marvel Rivals ranked from best to worst and which ones need a rework for the season 2 update. If you enjoyed this video and you agree with me, then don't forget to leave a like. If you disagree, then please comment down below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and thank you very much for watching.